So yeah, part 3, you don't know who the right people are until later. And thing is this. You see, this is how I see deities, and the reason why I'm just acknowledging it because when I not left, but just decided to not accept the label Christian because it had all these answers to all these questions I had, and I had more questions, and there was a whole ton of answers. Then there was more questions, and I got all the answers from there. And then there was more questions on top of that, and then they didn't get answered. Then more questions on top of that, and they didn't get answered. And then more questions on top of that, they didn't get answered. But I found answers in all these different ideologies that made sense to me, and me following my instincts has brought a lot of peace and serenity in my life. And even though I'm not where I want to be, I know I'm going to get there. You know, I know I'm going to get a 6-figure income and maintain it. I know I'm going to be earning double the amount as the average person, and I know that I have some form of leadership. Although I don't really care about the leadership thing, it's the pay thing, but that's what goes with it. And it's like, well, okay, so the money as well as the respect, okay, well, you know what, I'll be working on myself even more so in regards to that, because all the energy I was putting into other things that aren't yielding results, or weren't, is going to be redirected to where I am getting results, which will be that career. I know I'm going to get a woman, and it's good me saying that, because in private, I know used to geek, and if my family is watching, they probably are. Yeah, they are. My parents know this, and if they haven't told you this, you can go ask them. But when I was in my 20s, I used to go up to my mum and say, "Mum, do you think that I'll ever get a woman? Do you think that I'll ever get a woman?" There'll be like 2 or 3 months where, 2 or 3 weeks where I ask that every day. And then it will be like, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, it'll be every second day. And then the next 2 or 3 weeks, it'll be like every third day. And then the next 2 or 3 weeks, it'll be once a week. And then after that, there'll be like a 3 or 4 month period where I don't question it. And then it'll just be like around and round the merry-go-round when it comes to my mind for that whole decade in my 20s. So the fact that I can and that I don't deal with that, and the fact that I can say on social media without any hesitation, I know I'm going to get a woman, shows how far I've come. People say no one's coming to save you. Yeah. But there's another thing, that if you've gone through a lot of hard things in life, you appreciate things more. And, you have these delusions. Not all delusions are bad, but there's a time to put some of them to rest. What is it? For example, when I was younger, I used to look at some wrestlers and say they were cool, but they're not that great because they only won the WWF, used to be called WWF, they only won the WWF European Championship, or they only won the WWF Intercontinental Championship and Tag Team Championships. I'm going to be at least a 2 or 3 time World Heavyweight Champion. But then I trained in pro wrestling for 2 years. And then there was the COVID lockdown thing. We had all these issues and shows are postponed. But I put in hard yards. I was showing up to 2 trainings a week as well as working out the gym, and I did that for 2 years straight and didn't even get a debut. And then it was, everything went haywire with my employment in Hawke's Bay, so I had to, I decided to come down here. Now you look at those guys who maybe performed for the WWF for like 5 years or something, and they won that Intercontinental title twice, and they won the tag team title once, and you go like, man, they're really successful. And then you have a look at their incomes, here in New Zealand, like 120,000 or 130,000 is like double the amount as the average person. And you have a look at these wrestlers who are like underdogs, but they're kind of like, it is believable that they could, if the other guys made a couple of mistakes, if the guys who were not the underdogs made a couple of mistakes and the underdog guy capitalizes on those couple of mistakes, then they would defeat the guy who's not an underdog, but at the same time he has to make those mistakes that he wouldn't usually make. He has to not be on 100% of his game. This guy who's the underdog has to be at 100%, and not only has to be at 100%, but the other guy who's not the underdog needs to be at 85%, and if that were to be the case, then the underdog will get the win, right? So let's say I don't know what it is in America, but let's say here in New Zealand, 130,000 is like double the amount as the average person, or 120,000. Because it's, some say 60,000, some say 70, so, for 2025 here in New Zealand. And then those guys who are like the underdog wrestlers, like I just said, who may win one World Heavyweight Championship in a decade, but when they're in the Continental, like 3 times, in the Tag Team Championship 3 times in a decade. Those guys are like earning $400,000 or $500,000 a year. So there's certain delusions you have as a child or a teenager. If I'll put the hard work in, and let's say I'll win the title a couple of times, and then 2 or 3 years worth of training, and you don't even get a debut. But that's just because you're not made for it. It's nothing personal. But then you try all these other things, you try and you fail, and then every here and there you get some big wins, and you end up living a pretty good life, let's say, there's the whole security thing and other things, so if a few things come together, I'm not that far off of getting double the amount as the average person. And if I get a woman that I find personally attractive and we get along really well, and it's not a performance, you end up doing very well. But you feel just as great as if you would have got those other things when you were younger, because of all the hardship you went through to get to where you're at, right? This is my understanding of Shiva, and I can say that because Shiva represents the disillusionment of the ego. Oh, the ego gives you drive. Yeah, it does. So the ego is good, and it's needed for those things. But when you can't appreciate the small wins, and this is how I look at Shiva, because I've never been to India, and when this is one of the first beliefs I started studying, because I was just like, there is no God, and this world's a cruel world, and I went through that type of phase. I used to believe that the devil was out to get us and stuff, but God will win in the end, all that type of thing. And so, yeah,